Rain and lightning would begin to fall and strike as the bat symbol would raise upon the sky. The Batmobile would be driving to Arkham Asylum for the night that the Batman would never forget. But in this world and in this universe, things would change drastically, because in a totally different Earth, there is a Deathstroke, a Injustice Deathstroke that is currently standing at a teleporter. But what he didn't know is that teleporter would cross time, space, and reality itself, transporting him to the very moment, this moment, driving into Arkham. Arkham Asylum alongside the one and only, the Joker. Deathstroke would look to his right, and he would hear the Joker more or less remark about him being Batman, and about how this is going to be so fun, about how going to Arkham Asylum was in the cards, per se. And this would completely confuse Injustice Deathstroke, because he's now driving in, seeming unconsciously, into Arkham Asylum itself. Because this is, could Injustice Deathstroke survive Arkham Asylum? The Batman Arkham Asylum game, or Arkham Batman game, that involves Batman being more or less put into Arkham Asylum and having to defeat and survive against vast amounts of villains. But this is actually not Batman's story. This is Injustice Deathstroke's, because we're going to be talking about if Injustice Deathstroke, the one from the renowned Injustice games, or Injustice Gods Among Us, could actually survive this feat, could actually survive Arkham Asylum. So for starters, I want to start with what Injustice Deathstroke is truly capable of. For starters, we've seen him be able to endure torture from Cyborg and Raven, being that of magical and electrical torture. He's able to defeat a weakened Shazam because of a bomb that he exploded, and he references that his greater experience, ironically enough, is actually the reason why he's able to defeat him, even though Shazam has vast amounts of gods, varying from wisdom, strength, and so on. Deathstroke is also able to defeat a slightly hurt or weakened Flash that he was able to hurt via a bomb, but this is a speedster that shows feats that are insane and comparable to even time travel itself. And frankly, the Flash has always been a little bit underpowered in video games, but he was still extremely powerful. He also would go on to defeat people like Killer Frost, who he called massively one-dimensional, and even the most greatest feat in my opinion, that he would do would be defeating Wonder Woman, even saying that she is a part of an obsolete race with predictable techniques. Now, with his more or less fighting feats, or what he's basically done in the Injustice Gods Among Us game, let's talk about Deathstroke's powers and abilities, because they are a little bit different than the Batman himself, because we know Batman is not of more or less experiment, but Deathstroke truly is, especially Injustice Deathstroke. He has superhuman strength, agility, regeneration, or healing to an extent, and massively enhanced reflexes. Like I said, he is a borderline super soldier with massive amounts of acrobatics and a crazy military protocol or a military background, but even calling it a military background may be a vast understatement. He's a master strategist, very similar to Batman, and he's very skilled at martial arts. But unlike Batman, he's actually a killer. I mean, Injustice Deathstroke is not afraid to put someone down if need be. He's a skilled martial artist, and he's a flat-out weapon expert, utilizing stuff like swords, submachine guns, assault rifles with an explosive attachment, and so on. And you may be wondering, how could Injustice Deathstroke, or maybe you think, well, he definitely would survive Arkham Asylum, but what would the process look like? What would happen if he took down or took on every last one of Batman's, well, foes in Arkham Asylum? And we're going to start from the very beginning, and that would be with Zasz. Zasz, for starters, is kind of a interesting one, because Deathstroke doesn't really care about saving anyone, so he could, in technicality, just drop him like a bad habit, more or less just ending his life instantly. But if he were to decide, hey, I'm going to use my acrobatics to get behind Zasz and knock him out, he definitely could do that. He's shown on multiple occasions that he can go head to head with Batman, and there's arguments to be made that this version of Deathstroke is most likely on par, if not greater, probably far greater than the Arkham Deathstroke, because of the feats of going up against someone like Shazam and Wonder Woman would prove to be absolutely insane. So his acrobatics alone would allow him to get behind Zasz and could easily knock him out if he wanted to actually save the captured police officer. And for time's sake, we'll say that he actually wants to save the police officer, so that's exactly what he'll end up doing. So he doesn't necessarily have to kill Zasz, but he could go behind him and put a bullet through his head, or just knock him out with one foul swoop, being that we know that he's extremely good at martial arts itself. Or he could easily just slice off a limb with his sword or any other blades he's completely proficient in. But this isn't even the first true test, and frankly a lot of these aren't going to be extreme tests, but in terms of physical abilities, this is the first actual test we're going to talk about, and that would be the Titan Henchman. The Titan Henchman has massive amounts of physical abilities being pumped through with the Titan formula, and we know that it's practically like Bane's Venom, but on crazy juice. The Titan formula, or the injection, is more or less allowing for a lot of these creatures or other villains to be juiced up and even stronger than normal. The physical abilities of Titan Henchmen are impressive, but not as impressive as someone of the likes of Wonder Woman or someone of the likes of Shazam. And Wonder Woman is a perfect example, just because we know that Injustice Wonder Woman has no fear of killing. We know that this Wonder Woman is actually not going to hold back by any means. So when she took on more or less Deathstroke, she didn't hold back at all. She wasn't in a Wonder Woman form where she was worried about killing somebody. She was actually going out of her way to actually try to kill him, and he still was able to defeat her, showing how strong he truly is, just in flat out physical ability. And the Titan Henchman is not the smartest or sharpest tool in the shed, so he would easily be able to actually defeat this Titan Henchman. But as we all know, Arkham Asylum is built up of a ton of different aspects of boss fights. We have the raw strength, we have the stealth, the acrobatics, but we also have the mind games and the fear. Now, this would lead us into the very first fight with Scarecrow. Scarecrow is something that is pretty interesting, because this is where we kind of go down the rabbit hole of, could Scarecrow actually affect Injustice Deathstroke with his fear toxin? And if we go down the path of, well, we're going to have to guarantee that it does affect him in some way, then I could easily see Deathstroke being able to avoid the gaze of Scarecrow himself. And frankly, with his super soldier mind and shown resistance to torture and stuff like that, it could easily negate the fear toxin, like I've said before. But with his speed and acrobatic ability, he could easily avoid the gaze of Scarecrow and figure out that shining the bright light on Scarecrow would be the answer for the fight. And it would make it so you kind of have to pick your poison. Do you think that he would actually have to go through these acrobatic based kind of situations where he has to go and shine the light on Scarecrow? Or do you think that he would most likely just be able to block out with his super soldier mind and shown resistance to torture? Now, you can kind of go either way, and it could go either way for me, because I think as an older Injustice Deathstroke or an older Deathstroke, he has seen quite a lot of things in terms of what could possibly scare him. So there's a good chance that he does still find effect in the fear toxin. I mean, he has dealt with some absolute terrifying foes. I mean, we're talking about a Superman that was or that was turned evil, and a lot of these people, probably even including Deathstroke to a certain extent, never thought that Superman could turn evil to the extent he did, and that Batman would quote unquote be the good guy in this scenario. But that's kind of going a little bit off topic. Let's go on to the very next fight, and that would be Bane infused with Titan. With Titan pumped into Bane with Venom, it does pump up his strength quite a bit, but the difference in this fight compared to Batman is hands down the use of guns. We see that that Deathstroke would have to get behind Bane to slice off the tubes on his back. But yes, Deathstroke could technically do that with his sword, and his sword is pretty lengthy, so he would be able to do that at a distance, but he could even puncture the tubes itself very easily with his guns. I mean, for one, if he wanted to avoid killing Bane, he could 100% dodge the attacks, roll across the area, and actually use precise gunplay with his assault rifle to shoot holes within the tubes itself. And once he shoots the tubes itself to make those holes and open up and basically force the Titan to stop pumping through Bane, he would easily slow him down and weaken him drastically. Now, I will say he is lacking the actual Batmobile, which normally the Batmobile was the way Batman defeats Bane, slamming him into the more or less the water, but he does have an explosive attachment to his assault rifle, so there's a good chance that he could just utilize that to knock Bane into the water. Or you could even make the argument that he slows down Bane so drastically and to a certain point that he's able to finish him no matter what. I mean, he could finish him with a lethal blow, being that he has high caliber bullets that he can utilize to actually more or less kill Bane, or he could just straight up slice him or stab him with a fatal wound with a sharp edge of a blade. But in my headcanon, I would rather it be that he uses the explosive attachment to his assault rifle to launch him into the water and basically be a done deal with this Titan infused Bane. Now, we go on to the next Scarecrow fight, which is avoiding the gaze again, which you could see any of the major events of Injustice in terms of Tyrant Superman. And what I mean by this is he could actually see visually maybe anything that would make him quote unquote scared. Maybe it's a Tyrant Superman, maybe it's kind of all of these kind of rogue type of heroes, quote unquote, where they're like the people like Raven and Cyborg and stuff like that. Maybe he goes back to the torture, but like I've said before, I mean, he doesn't have these mental scars that Batman really does in Arkham Asylum. Injustice Deathstroke just doesn't have that nowhere near as much, especially with his mental fortitude. He just doesn't have that like Batman does. And the only way I could even see his mental kind of being messed with would be just all of the like tyrannical characters in Injustice, like I said, like your Supermans, your Wonder Womans, your evil cyborgs and Ravens and stuff like that. Those are the ones that I think he would probably see. He most likely wouldn't see any dead relatives or anything like that, but like I said before, his mental strength is insane, especially in Justice Deathstroke. He even rigs a bomb to explode and flat out says that he's not afraid to die with it, that he's ready to watch the fireworks explode alongside everyone else that is currently there, which he did kind of go rogue when he did this. But his mental fortitude is to the point that he doesn't fear death and he doesn't fear all of these things. And death is the one thing that most people do fear drastically. Even Batman to an extent fears it, even though it's not necessarily his own death that he fears. He has more or less fears of his parents' death and so on. Now, with that said, I feel like that's going to be a common occurrence I'm going to speak about, that Scarecrow doesn't affect Injustice Deathstroke as much as he would an actual Arkham Batman. But with that said, let's go on to the Harley Quinn portion of the fights. And this fight as well is far, far from close. I mean, this is not even fair. Harley Quinn, just like facing off with Batman, won't really stand a chance against really any version of Deathstroke. I mean, most of this is kind of just him beating up on random henchmen and so on. And yes, you could make the argument that this version of Deathstroke doesn't have the technology to kind of infiltrate certain doors or stuff like that, but that's kind of a cop-out. I mean, you could just say that, okay, well, maybe he just blasts through the doors themselves. I mean, he has an explosive attachment with his guns, he has high caliber bullets, he could easily brute force his way through the doors, or maybe with his high intelligence actually learn and figure out how to hack through these doors to get to Harley Quinn. But just like Batman, when Harley Quinn would attack Batman at the very end, I mean, it wouldn't even be a fun fight. Deathstroke would easily put her down, and if he so chooses to, and he has no patience for this, maybe the long night of Arkham Asylum is currently getting to him, and he's annoyed of the fact that he's being treated as if he's Batman, maybe he puts a bullet straight between her eyes. That wouldn't surprise me one bit at all, and I just don't see this Injustice Deathstroke kind of playing this stupid game with this Harley Quinn. So he wouldn't find any solace in the idea of, oh, I'm going to just, mess around and knock her out normally. He might straight up just end game her, which that's a genuine thing that could definitely happen. But for now, we'll just say that, yes, he could beat her. It's not like a hard fight. A large amount of henchmen can't really do much, and getting through various doors and such is not a hard feat for someone like Injustice Deathstroke, who is extremely intelligent and basically wise beyond his massive amounts of years, because he may be on the older side, but it's as if he's lived for hundreds of years. That's how intelligent he truly is. This would then lead us to the third Scarecrow fight. And this would be when he basically fights these skeletal-like creatures, and it really tests his mental fortitude. And Scarecrow even references basically saying that the more he fights and the more he kind of tries to break through the fear toxin, the more it's going to seep in and break his will. But I mean, there is no will to be broken here, and I think Scarecrow might arguably be the easiest fight for Deathstroke. I just don't think that Scarecrow would even have an effect on Deathstroke at all, especially this Injustice Deathstroke. I mean, this is someone that is a hardened assassin with no feelings. Like, this guy doesn't care, and he continues to build up this resistance, and he would have a massive resistance against Scarecrow. And actually, funny enough, the doors themselves, getting through the doors to eventually fight Harley Quinn, might be more difficult than the Scarecrow fight itself. And it's just really this Arkham Asylum Scarecrow that isn't that effective in terms of this Injustice Deathstroke. I mean, at the end of the day, the Scarecrow just wouldn't have the effect that it would have on Batman. Now, this would eventually lead us to the Killer Croc portion of the fights, and this would follow the same path of them, or Arkham Batman normally gathering the spores, which we would have to pass on this objective to Deathstroke or Injustice Deathstroke. Yes, it might seem kind of odd because, let's be honest, Injustice Deathstroke probably wouldn't care that much about saving or basically helping this entire place, but just for the sake of this quote-unquote comparison to how he would basically go about his business, we'll just make it so that he does go and try and gather these spores. And I don't want to get too deep into like, oh, me trying to fix the story to fit like lore and stuff like that. It doesn't really matter. This isn't necessarily that type of video. But he would follow the same path of gathering the spores just for the sake of giving him, like I said, the path of Batman. And he would utilize his explosives or high caliber bullets to more or less stun the Killer Croc. Yes, the Killer Croc is a pretty strong foe here. And the fact that he's in kind of his own domain and his own place makes things pretty darn difficult, because the Killer Croc is in kind of a sewer system and you are playing in his playground, and you're definitely leaning toward his advantages because you're trying to hunt down and search for these spores that would basically give Killer Croc openings. But even with that said, I mean, he has all the weaponry and he 100% has the ability to actually hurt the Killer Croc. I mean, this Deathstroke has gone up against things far, far greater and far crazier than Killer Croc, and he would be able to definitely stun and massively hurt Killer Croc with the weaponry that he currently holds. And I just don't think Killer Croc will be able to even touch this version of Deathstroke, even though they are in his domain. It would make it hard for him to get the spores, but that's really about it. Even being that he is older and he isn't super active and stuff like that, this Injustice Deathstroke, relating it to the lore of him, it actually is not really mattering that he's older, because he ends up even making a new Titans and making a group of literal political assassins. So his age in this regard wouldn't even affect his fighting ability to someone like Killer Croc, and basically anybody else could pertain to this list. His old, or him being older, literally doesn't matter, because for one, I mean, he's juiced up like a super soldier, but also because he's proven that his old age doesn't really affect him. And even after the events of Injustice Gods Among Us, he still is insanely active as a political assassin himself. So this would easily allow him to gather the spores and stuff like that. But this would lead to arguably the hardest fight, actually probably the hardest fight hands down, in the Arkham Asylum game. And that would be Poison Ivy. And I don't mean this in terms of like a skill level of the game itself. Like, I'm not saying that the game, when you play the game, it's a hard fight. But I mean, in terms of the feats that Poison Ivy could definitely portray here, would be kind of insane. I mean, we know that she was now infused with Titan. She got that Titan juice. So you know that she's overrun the entirety of Arkham Asylum in plant life. And this would make it pretty darn difficult for someone like Deathstroke to actually kind of get her out of the state of this massive plant that is basically taking over everything. And I will say the one thing that does benefit him pretty much is his ranged attacks. We see that Batman basically throws batarangs at her to stun her out of her giant platform. But this version of basically the story, Deathstroke would have weaponry, explosive ammo, and high caliber ammo, and flat out weaponry that could slice through the plant life. But it wouldn't be easy by any means. I want to make that very clear. This fight, if you look at it logically outside of a video game aspect, would be the hardest one, and hands down the hardest one, because Poison Ivy is a very strong foe in just raw strength. And the fact that she has these hundreds of plants, thousands of plants that could assist her would make it pretty darn difficult. But luckily enough, I mean, we know Deathstroke has insane reflexes, has insane precise aim. I mean, this guy was literally able to basically spot out where Deathshot was when shooting at him. And I know this is not technically Injustice Deathstroke, that is actually Arkham Deathstroke, but that's the type of feats that he's capable of, or that's the type of feats that Deathstroke flat out is capable of. And Injustice Deathstroke has taken on foes far stronger than Arkham Deathstroke himself. So the fact that he would fight this Poison Ivy, he would definitely be able to get by her. Like I said though, this would not be an easy fight by any means. The fact that she has hundreds or thousands of plants that can fight alongside her would definitely be a hard thing, or a hard task for Injustice Deathstroke to go through. But his long-range weaponry, his assault rifle, his explosive attachment, his even submachine guns to a large extent, would allow him to fend off these plants. And he has a very, very, very sharp and lethal sword that he can also use proficiently, that in my eyes, the way I see the fight ending would be his quote-unquote finisher, him tossing the sword up into the sky, shooting some weapons or shooting some bullets, and kicking the sword directly toward Poison Ivy and defeating her once and for all. And this would be basically his way of taking down a Titan juiced up Poison Ivy. But we all know that this Poison Ivy fight is not the final fight. We know the main villain has to be at the very end, and basically who we've been chasing this entire time practically would be the one, the only, the Joker. The one that we started with, and this Joker would be a little bit different, and by a little bit, I mean a bit different. We know that he infuses himself with basically Titan, and he's a big, strong man. Big man, and he's Titan Joker. But I'm not gonna lie, Titan Joker is kind of a joke. And it sucks to say this, but it's kind of the truth. And no pun intended with the idea of Joker being, you know, kind of a joke. But Batman ends up defeating him with an explosive gel punch, basically exploding it on his hand. But I mean, we've seen that this guy, this Injustice Deathstroke, has insane punching power. That's just one. Has crazy strategy, and that's two. And also his weaponry itself packs one hell of a punch. I mean, he's utilizing weaponry that Batman would never use. He's utilizing weaponry that is made to do what? To kill. He's an assassin. And this would allow him to have a far easier fight against Joker. And in terms of the antidote, and in terms of all that, I mean, come on, Injustice Deathstroke would not allow himself to become a Titan. He's not an absolute idiot, and he injects himself with that cure and fights off this version of Titan Joker relatively easily. So to answer the question, could Injustice Deathstroke survive Arkham Asylum? I mean, I think the idea of him surviving it is kind of a disrespectful one. Because Injustice Deathstroke would absolutely run house on Arkham Asylum and would run house on the entire video game itself. But I would love to hear what you guys have to think. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Let me know in the comment section below. Maybe you're thinking, oh, you forgot about this. You forgot about this. Let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear it, honestly. I might have missed some things, and that happens sometimes. So I would love to hear what you guys have to say. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to show some love. Leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below. Shout out to my boy, Comic Fiend, for giving me this idea. And I've known him for quite a while, so I'm sure I'll get some people saying that I copied him. But I've known this guy for like 4 years now. We've been doing YouTube together for a long time. This is not my first channel ever. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Shout out to him. Love that dude. He's the best. And yeah, he'll probably be in the link in the description somewhere. And I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Like I said, I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.